Hello, everybody. This is episode 9 of The Grief of Politics. I'm Joseph Carlson. I'm here with Avin Carroll.
9?
Yeah, 9.
Wow. We've done a bunch of these.
Yeah, 9 of them, because we do one a month. So many. This month was Avin's. Choice. You chose vaccine hesitancy because you are bewildered by it. In fact, we probably should have just recorded all of the phone calls that we made to each other over the past month, reading different articles, and you've been talking to people, some of them in church, some of them not. I've talked to a few people, but I get very tired talking to some of these people about why they should get the vaccine. I, of course, think it's life-saving. There's a lot of data to say that. We have 3 articles we're going to be focusing on, but first, Avin, I have a surprise. Not much of a surprise.
Oh.
So what I did is I went on our account on SoundCloud, and we haven't had a lot of listens, but over the past 30 days, we've got 8 people listening from San Francisco, 8 people from Dublin, Ireland, and 6 people from Tacoma. If you shrink that into 7 days, there is some people that have listened from Texas and Germany. Richardson, Texas, so I don't know if that means anything to you.
Yeah.
Having lived in Texas. I don't know if it's a friend. And Germany in general. And so we actually have listeners now, which is crazy because usually it's just us yelling into a mic. So thanks everybody for listening. And this comes out once a month. And Avin and I just try to have a reasonable conversation about politics every month. One of us chooses a topic. This month was Avin's turn to choose a topic. He chose vaccine hesitancy. So, we're just going to have a talk about that. And we do this every month. And so, make sure to give us the likes, the subscribes, all that kind of stuff on the platform of your choice. I'm still trying to get it on the Google Play Store. They sent me a notice with my other podcast that I haven't got a lot of plays, and they want me to update all the information. So I don't know how long my other podcast is long for the Google Play Store, because they're trying to, I've only had a few plays on Google Play Store for all the 100 and some odd episodes I've had. So I think they're trying to weed out, or at least improve the algorithm. I don't think they're going to purge it, but just thanks for listening in general. So
I think this podcast's actually doing better.
Yeah,
as far as number of listens.
Yeah, this podcast is doing much better because when I checked, episode 2, and I've looked on SoundCloud, apparently their insight metrics are actually pretty accurate. Like a lot of people online said, no, this is pretty accurate from people that I've talked to. And we're just getting more and more listeners, which is good. So like I said, we're not, we're not getting a sponsorship or anything yet from Satva mattresses or what's the other one? All the other ones you hear from other podcasts listen to, there's a postage one you always hear about. And anyway, so this month was Avin's, choice. I want to remind you guys before we start that this will hit, this always hits the 20th of the month at 7 a.m. At our website, www.thegriefofpolitics.com. So go there, let us know what you think. And really quickly, sorry, Avin, before we start, I forgot. So last month we did Texas, and you and I were like, man, we probably didn't really talk about a lot of the grief in that episode. But 2 other things that we talked about in that episode was the ban on permits for concealed carry. Well, not a ban, but they're not required.
The removal of.
Yeah. And then the other thing was the abortion bill. Both those things passed. Mm-hmm. So I don't think we need to talk about the grief of privatizing citizens like we talked about last month into basically making a bounty system. There's some people, I read some articles about it, and there's a good lawyer on YouTube called Legal, and he kind of broke down legally what it meant for people and how the lower Texas courts were able to get around any of the kind of 2 standing lawsuits, Roe v. Wade, and there was a Planned Parenthood lawsuit, and how the lawmakers were able to write around the law to allow it to go into effect. Because basically by them writing that it was private citizens that were basically would have to bring charges up to get the bounty, or at least start a lawsuit that there's nobody to sue. Basically, you can't sue the public, and so you have to have you have to have a specific party to sue, basically. And since the public is not a specific party, that's how they were able to get around it.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And that's an overgeneralization. I recommend people go to Legal on YouTube yes, he's on YouTube, but he is a practicing lawyer. He does break the stuff down. He cites a lot of case studies to say that that's kind of how they got around with it. And basically by the Supreme Court, it does have a conservative majority, but by them using the shadow docket, as it's called, instead of trying the case and listening to arguments, they basically just said, well, we don't really have a problem with this and we can't really do anything about it. So it basically allows it to become law because they're not basically making, and the dissenting arguments basically said, I think there was three, the liberal judges, and they basically said, deputizing people is dangerous, and also that also using the shadow docket is dangerous because what else can you use this shadow docket for other than this? You could use it for a lot of other issues that you just don't want to listen to or try or whatever. So it's a dangerous precedent, basically, is what's been said. Now, the DOJ is going to sue them, but apparently that's going to be difficult because they're trying to sue specific parties. And again, there isn't a specific party, so we'll see what happens. So listen to that last episode. Go to Legal Eagle. This is kind of an announcement because I was listening to all this stuff. That broke pretty much after we recorded the episode. I think like a week or two after we recorded, I think it went into effect. So, yeah. So I guess we don't really have to talk about the grief for that one because that is terrible. But this time is yours, Avin. It's a vaccine hesitancy. So what do you want to... Well, so what is your general opening statement about vaccine hesitancy? Because you and I don't always see eye to eye, but I think we do about this. So what was your inspiration for picking vaccine hesitancy? Why did you want to talk about it?
So, like, you and I have spent a lot of time. Like you said, we could have just recorded all of our previous conversations about the vaccine and vaccine hesitancy and use that for this podcast. I've had many passionate conversations with my mother about it. She lives in southern Idaho, and southern Idaho has a very high level of vaccine hesitancy. Idaho as a whole is really famous around here lately in the news because northern Idaho is, again, very high on the unvaccinated population, and their hospitals are strained so heavily that they're now in crisis mode. They're turning everyone away except for the most sick. And so what's ending up happening is citizens from Idaho are going to Spokane and the surrounding area to get treatment and overflowing the hospitals in Spokane.
Yeah, people don't know geography. Spokane's west of Idaho, so those people are just traveling west basically to go to a hospital, basically.
I mean, from Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, which is, I think, the biggest city in northern Idaho, to Spokane is a half an hour drive. Like, they're really close.
Yeah, because you got that sliver of land on the top of Idaho, so and that's pretty much where Coeur d'Alene is, right? So if you drive over from that, yeah.
So in all of that, like in all of our conversations back and forth, like both you and I are vaccinated. Both you and I are comfortable with the vaccine. We feel comfortable with the potential risks of the vaccine, and so we've opted to get vaccinated and are not, hesitant on that. I don't know, you might have been a little bit, but I mean, for me personally, I'm not. The technology...
Well, no, I couldn't wait. I was trying, but because it was hard in the beginning to get it, just because so many people were getting it in our area, and so I had to wait like a month or two before. And it was a pop-up clinic that showed up, and they said, if you're not here this day, which is what I did, I showed up that day.
Even for Lisa and I, it was the same scenario up here, right? Because everyone, in where we are in the United States, Western Washington in particular, is an area that's been very welcoming to the vaccine. We were one of the first regions in the country to hit that 70% threshold. The city of Seattle, which we're both about an hour's drive away from, Seattle, I think, was the first city to hit 70%. And it's probably not true anymore, but for a while, Seattle was the highest vaccinated city in the country. Since we're both so close to Seattle, like that just spreads out into the surrounding suburbs and communities and cities around in the region. That influence affects the whole region. So, it just made me curious because, I've done a lot of reading and a lot of watching videos from like Dr. Z that you and I have talked about.
Yeah.
And for me personally, it seems like all the numbers and all the data say that the vaccine is very effective. And I think the data shows that the vaccine is extremely effective.
Yeah, it seems like all three of them. Even the Johnson & Johnson is effective as well. And the one that even got pulled for a bit is now.
Yeah. And which we can come back to some of those numbers. In fact, I want to talk about some of the numbers I've seen even outside of the articles that I shared with you for our discussion today. There's some new interesting numbers as well. But I wanted to get an idea on like what is it really that people are getting upset about, because everything we see in the news, or at least this is my perception, everything you hear in the news is that like these people that aren't getting vaccinated, these ones that are hesitant, are one, anti-vaxxers, which is a very different thing. And one of these articles actually does a good job of being clear to delineate an anti-vaxxer from someone who's vaccine hesitant for COVID-19.
They've taken other vaccines, but this is the one they're just not sure of.
And I think it's really good that they're delineating that language, because so many people are being labeled as anti-vax just because they don't want to do the COVID-19 vaccine. And that's, in my opinion, an intentional vilification of the large number of Americans that are hesitant for the COVID-19 vaccine. Where was my other point on that? I went off on a tangent for a second and I lost my main line of thought.
The idea is you just wanted to know why people feel the way they do, basically, because there is a pandemic happening right now. The vaccines are safe, but yet a large percentage of people just still don't want to get the vaccine.
Yeah, and so I wanted to see if there's any real research on it that's not vilifying of these people that are reluctant or hesitant to get the vaccine, and kind of what's the reasoning behind it. From like a fair conversation and not a hypercritical, derogatory, like you're a moron or you're an anti-vaxxer or you're a selfish nitwit, which seems to be the primary narrative you're hearing about people that aren't vaccinated, is they're either stupid or they're selfish. They don't care about anyone else.
Yeah, those are the primary arguments, I think, yeah.
And I don't think that's fair, one, because I'm definitely of the mindset, and we've had this conversation many times on many topics, I'm of the mindset that the best way to sway someone's opinion is to get to know them, to get to understand the reasoning behind it, to find common ground, and then have actual open dialogue from there. And I think you would agree, I think most people would agree, when you start your presentation on you're a moron for not doing this, or you're a jerk and selfish for not doing this, you're not likely to win anyone to your case.
Yeah, that's true. So do you want to just get into the articles now,
or? Sure, yeah.
Which one do you want to do? I think I just have them in order of what you sent to you. So there's one from News 10 ABC, which is out of Albany, it looks like, New York, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
And so this one is basically just statistics.
A lot of data.
But it's really good because it goes over New York, Vermont, Massachusetts, and I believe, that's it. I thought there was one more. Oh, it just got cut out. I mean,
it does go into like the national average of statistics as well.
Yeah, so you have like 39% of people don't trust the vaccine, 37% of people don't trust the government, and 20% of people don't think COVID is a big threat. That's from New York. Vermont is a lower percentage, 25% don't trust the vaccine, 32% don't trust the government, and 25% don't think COVID is a big threat. And in Massachusetts, 39% don't trust the vaccine, 35% don't trust the government, and 19% don't think COVID is that big of a threat.
So they're in the Northeast. That's the breakdown of people that aren't vaccinated and kind of their positions. I do think it's interesting to note, though, that a very high percentage, over half of these people, are also concerned about side effects. which it was 46% are concerned about side effects in New York, 66% are concerned in Vermont about the side effects, and 53% about the side effects of in Massachusetts. And like in the conversation with the people I talk to, the common refrain from everyone I've talked to that doesn't want to get the vaccine is, it's not thoroughly tested, it's not proven, we don't know what the long-term side effects are going to be. Mm-hmm. Of which, you know, you and I have discussed, there's something like over 300 million doses administered in the United States.
Over the past year.
175 million Americans have been fully vaccinated. Actually, it's even higher than that, I think. Right. And, you know, we're definitely seeing side effects and negative effects, but it's an incredibly small percentage. Right. And so for me personally, like I look at the numbers and I say, well, yeah, admitting we're kind of experimenting a little bit on our population because they only tested on like 40,000 people in each of the trials.
Right.
But the numbers pan out, right? The numbers we're seeing in the population versus the numbers we saw in the testing are pretty close to what we would expect from a vaccine reaction, and are pretty close to the level of reaction that we get out of more common vaccines like MMR, or tetanus, or some of the other vaccines that you would get, even the flu vaccine. And I've actually known people in my life when I was younger that never got some of the more common elementary school vaccinations because they were actually allergic to the vaccines and right. They could kill them. So
yeah, I mean, that is something that can happen to some people, you know. But like you and I have talked about on the phone, mm-hmm. That's the reason why you and I get vaccinated, is so we can be around those people. I mean, it's our responsibility because they cannot be vaccinated to Correct. Vaccinate ourselves. And I think I understand all of that. Like, yes, we've only been using this vaccine for a year. I understand that. Yeah, we don't have all the data, you know, but the data we do have shows that the vaccine is effective. You might still get COVID if you have the vaccine, but your symptoms are less severe. Mm-hmm. You have a better chance of not being hospitalized, mm-hmm. so you're not taking resources from an already overtaxed system, and you are ill fewer days. So mm-hmm. to me, what I've noticed is there seems to be, and this is with every argument, and this is one of the problems I have with some politics, and it doesn't matter what side you're on, is a lot of people like to use anecdotes, you know. Well, I knew this guy that this thing happened to, or I knew this woman something happened to. It's like, that's true, and those things mean a lot to everybody, but like it's kind of like the worst of both examples, I guess. Basically, you can't just live your life by anecdotes. You know, there has to be real numbers, but it is also difficult trying to spew numbers and facts to people because that seems so cold. You know, like it's hard to realize. But also at the other end of the spectrum, if you know somebody that has died from a vaccine or been had a side effect or even died from the COVID vaccine, the very rare case. It's difficult to tell them, well, you know, your loved one was just a statistic and it was rare, because, you know, that person obviously meant a lot to you, hopefully. But I mean, the best thing you have to go on is, like I've told people lately, is just talk to your doctor. You know, if your doctor is, hopefully most people have had primary care, like their primary care provider for years. And so if go to your doctor, you start talking to them about everything and your doctor says, yes, go get it. I think you should. Because the one thing that you brought up that I'm kind of tired of hearing is the personal freedom, because I don't think that's even applicable in this argument. And I get really mad when I keep hearing about, well, what about my freedoms? And I'm like, that's not how freedom works. You don't, like, no, everybody has the right to breathe. And the way the COVID works with the incubation period of up to 10 to 14 days, you know, you could be having a conversation with someone and just breathing, practicing your right, and don't know that you're infecting someone, or maybe you bring something home to somebody that is not vaccinated and they get sick and maybe they have some comorbidity you don't know about. I mean, I asked you before we talked a lot, and like, what did you say about your church? You said that people, they've taken kind of a neutral stance.
Yeah.
And my thing is like it probably should have been more like, hey, we're part of a community and we need to do right by the people in our community. If your doctor tells you to get vaccinated, please get vaccinated, because you're just helping out the community and people you care about. It's not about you, And that's a problem I have with the personal freedom argument, because it turns it into I need this, I need that. It's like, well, we all need to make this become an endemic, not a pandemic, as Dr. Z says on YouTube. We want this to be like the common cold, where we get a booster every year along with the flu shot. We don't want to shut businesses down. We don't want to do any of that again, And I'm not a fan of, nationwide mandates like Joe Biden, mandating that you have to get a vaccine. Like, even being liberal, that's troubling to me that the president has to do that. But the fact that the Delta variant has ripped through parts of the country, in unvaccinated parts of the country, worse than other parts of the country, and there's new variants like the Mu variant, and I'm sure there's others. Like, what do you do? The most basic job in the government, in my opinion, is the health and safety of the citizens in that government, and life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. The idea that I don't want Biden to tell people to get a vaccine, but like if you're killing people and not even knowing it, just going about your life. But it's like we have this incredible tool at our disposal, and if you're not using it, well, now I'm going to tell you have to do this, And so, again, I'm not a fan of the mandates, but, I mean, it almost feels like, not that his hand was forced, but, like, I don't know what else he could do, because it doesn't seem like anything's improving by just hoping that people get it. And so that's troubling to me,
Yeah. So, a few different things sort of in response to that. Right off the bat, the three statistics you read out of that article from News 10 in New York was don't trust the vaccine, don't trust the government, or don't think COVID is a big threat. But the two most important ones for me in that, when we're talking about it's the government's job, responsibility to take care of the health and safety of its citizens, right? To set up systems, regulations that protect its citizens and their health in order that we may pursue life. Liberty is a key component of our philosophy in the United States, but number one there is life, liberty, and then the pursuit of happiness.
Right.
So I think there's a component of it that's really the government's responsibility for why we're running into this, right? Like, the government is now impinging upon our personal freedoms, our liberties, by dictating we have to take this medication, or this vaccine, because the government did a really, 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 really terrible job at the beginning of COVID in communicating with us. It starts off with Fauci with don't wear masks, you don't need a mask, we believe it's communicated on surfaces, don't go buy masks, don't need masks. Within a month, go buy masks, we need masks, go get masks. You've got Trump out at the beginning, it's not that big of a deal, it doesn't kill that many people. In fact, initially not even really saying anything and intentionally being quiet about it.
Well, and also, and also saying, like, this will blow over in a couple months. We'll be out of this by spring.
Correct. And everyone wants to be optimistic and positive at the beginning of it. Like, even I remember my conversations with my mom, like, now 2-week lockdown isn't going to be a 2-week lockdown. Because a 2-week lockdown, then you've still got, like, potential for all the other 2-week carryovers. So we're looking at months. But I didn't expect it to be, we're coming up on
a year and a half.
We're past a year and a half. We're getting closer to 2 years now. With living
was
with
it February, basically?
I was early March, mid-March.
Beginning of March.
Yeah. And a lot of that is government mismanagement of the vaccine, because the government has gone back and forth on its stances for so long with COVID. And so, yes, people need to be responsible with the virus. And I think if we'd been talked to correctly, if it hadn't been politicized, and if it had just been addressed directly as a health concern, I think we'd be in a much better position. But we end up in this...
I'm not excusing you that. I mean, Fauci did say, like, yeah, I did mislead people on masks because the medical personnel were running out of masks. So if I told everybody to go get N95 masks, then we would have ran out of masks. But if he would have said that, like, hey, we don't have a lot of masks. And again, I mean, to me, this is all, I mean, it's a soup, right? It's not one, like,
Correct.
a silver bullet thing. It's not all, like, what I hear mostly on the right is, Fauci lied. And I'm like, on the left, they say Trump lied. It's like, this took as Hillary Clinton famously said, this took a village of people to basically bungle this so bad. And I don't think that I don't think there was malice. I think it was just looking at the situation going, oh, we got to manage this. And not, whatever other problems I have with Trump, like that stuff.
I don't think it was malice. It's different levels of reaction and how to handle it. And because it was so mishandled, the two number one things, the two most concerning things for why people are hesitant is don't trust the vaccine and don't trust the government.
Right.
Now, that leads into...
Oh, good. Are you going to go to the other article?
Yep. That leads into the next article, which is...
the Fox News one?
The Fox News article. It's
right.
Trump says Dems disparaged COVID-19 vaccine while he was president. Now they wonder why, quote, that was in a quote, now they wonder why some are hesitant. This is by Brooks Singman on Fox News.
Yeah, you brought this up to me on a phone call, which was a good question of, like, if Trump had been reelected, would more people be vaccinated? Because he obviously did this. And it's one of the rare things that Trump said something that you're like, that doesn't make sense. But he talked about Kamala Harris saying, well, if Trump told us to take it, we would not take it. Now, there's reasons why I think she said that. But he was right. She did say that in an interview, like, well, if Trump told us to take it, I wouldn't take it. But at the time, Trump was also telling people to inject bleach and use sunlight.
He did
UV
not
rays.
Say inject bleach.
No, he didn't say to inject bleach.
He did not say inject UV rays.
He said
you're mischaracterizing the words that were spoken.
Well, he basically said, I think we could use UV.
If we could, wouldn't that be great? Like, yeah. Totally mischaracterized in the press. 100%. Well, I mean,
but I'm saying, like, so he's the president. He was having those briefings. And when you're flippantly saying stuff about the virus, and we've heard tapes of him going, oh, yeah, I totally downplayed it because I didn't want there to be panic. That's another link in the chain, in my opinion, where...
Correct.
If you were up there saying...
this is part of the government mistrust, right? Like not sharing the information correctly, right? You're president. You've got to balance. I don't want to panic as the president. Fauci, I don't want to rush on masks. We need to save them for health professionals. But you're the freaking federal government. Like, you basically just say, hey, every pharmacy in the United States, pull your masks off the shelf and ship them back. Hey, American citizens, you can't go buy masks right now because we are taking them for the hospitals. That's why you're on lockdown. When they're available, go get them or fashion your own.
And there was also problems with us having a privatized health system where different hospitals had to bid for masks, and like, if you were underbid or overbid, then you would lose out on your mask privileges, basically. A lot of people talked, rightfully so. They weren't saying anything disparaging about Trump, but, well, I mean, they were, but they said, if you started I forget what it's called, but it was like the Emergency Medical Act, like he could have started producing masks right away. It was something that happened in World War II. It was like all this stuff. And so, again, I think, at least on the right, there's a lot of talk about how Fauci screwed up and all this. And it's like, yeah, I'm not going to lie. Like, Fauci could have just came out and said, like you said, we're short on masks. Please don't use masks. We need them for medical personnel. Use a scarf. Use something. It's something until we get more masks. He could have said that, and then it would have been like, okay. But Trump also has to take the blame of, like, I'm kind of rambling for an hour here talking about UV and bleach, and we don't really know if that's going to help. I mean, the doctor that was sitting next to me, and she didn't stand up and go, hang on, I'm sorry, Mr. President, can I just stop up here? I don't want there to be any, she could have taken the podium, Dr. Bricks or whatever, and said, I don't want there to be any, here's what we're trying right now. Yes, clean the surfaces, but don't clean them with UV, use bleach, like, to clean the surface, like, whatever. That could have been, and there's this like, it's like a Plinko machine. It just goes down the line and just gets more and more muddied. And Trump did have a point, if none of this would have happened, like, and you brought up a good point too, like, if Trump was reelected, would more people be vaccinated? He was at a rally in down south, like in Alabama or something. I forget, maybe Florida. I don't know. It was somewhere down south, and he said, "I got vaccinated," and he was booed.
No, he encouraged people to get vaccinated and reported, like, "Hey, I've been vaccinated. You should get vaccinated." That's not the wording. That's not the quote. And that's where he got booed by a large amount of the audience there.
Which I was like, wow.
And that's like, hey, if we go back to the end of 2020, Trump wins the election, and the reelected Trump administration comes in and pushes out the vaccine. Do we have higher levels of vaccination, or do we have the same level of vaccine hesitancy because they don't trust the government because of the things that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden had said about, well, it's not really tested? Because that's one of the other things is, one of the most common things you hear from people is, well, it's not thoroughly tested. It didn't go through testing correctly. And we had politicians telling people, don't take it, or I won't take it, it hasn't been tested, that are now literally completely 180 flipped just because Joe Biden won the election. Oh, no, go get the vaccine. It's fine. It's tested. Go do it.
Well, I mean, in their defense, I'm not saying they didn't flip-flop, but I mean, in their defense, it has been another year. So there is more data out there to say...
That's not when they flipped, though, Joe. They flipped, immediately after the inauguration.
Yeah, I mean... Well, like I said, I think people need to... I think you and I agree, though, that people need to say... the government isn't just one person. So if you think Fauci is lying to you, he is not the government. It was a governing body of people, and then Trump was in office.
And that's my overarching argument here, right? Is if the government as a whole, not individual people, but as a whole, are elected officials, Congress, Senate, and the president and his cabinet, all of them mismanaged this, and all of them made it a game of politics, not public health and safety. Yeah. And Trump is 100% correct here. Kamala Harris and Joe Biden disparaged the vaccine under his presidency, and in my opinion, that was political. It had nothing to do with research or what's going on. They were being very political, and more left-leaning news organizations were being more critical of the process. Well, is this really going to be tested? We really want the vaccine, but it seems like it's really being rushed through and pushed through.
Well, it is interesting that it's flipped the other way, too, because now most of that stuff does come from, Fox News. And
correct.
It's weird how it just, flipped, 180, hey, maybe we shouldn't take it.
Because this public health issue that all of our politicians should have been in line on became this, political issue. Well, Trump's president, and this is somewhere where he's weak, so we should attack him on it. And then it flipped, and now Biden's president, and it's still an issue, so we need to attack Biden on it. For the life of me, and you can hear it in my raised voice, I'm so passionate about the irresponsibility of our elected officials, and Americans don't hold them accountable. We keep electing these same career politicians that would rather point fingers and get reelected than actually do their jobs.
I think that's going to be another episode when we do term limits. I don't know when we're going to do that, but we should do term limits. Just put that on the never finished list of things that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, and I'm 100%. That should definitely be one.
The last article that I want to talk about, because this is probably the one I took the most notes about. Mm-hmm. It's from CNET. I found you linked it through MSN, but it was on CNET. It's called COVID Vaccine Hesitancy: Why People Don't Want the Shot. It was written by Jessica Rendell at 9/8/2021. And then it talks about how the Food and Drug Administration. So the first vaccine was available in December of 2020, and then it goes on. It talks a lot about the conspiracy theories. Some people thought there was a microchip in it. The one thing I thought was interesting was the this, like I said, this is the one where I took the most amount of notes. The Kaiser Family Foundation poll that came out in July said that white Christian or people under the age of 65 definitely were not going to get the vaccine.
Yeah, it's people under the age of 65 without health insurance. Just want to clarify that because a lot of people under 65 have gotten it.
Sorry, I wrote that down. I'm not reading a direct quote, so I probably missed that. But 58% of Republicans and 40% of people of color said they're going to wait and see, and what happens. I will say though, there was a whole chapter about, we talked about a little bit before, about the idea, the so-called I don't think it's a big deal, probably won't affect me. I called it the immortality feeling of, it's young people that think I'm fine, so I don't need to get it, But then you might run into problems because, as we're finding out as this is going on and on and on, is that more young people are being affected. We still don't really know the full picture with children. It looks like right now they are okay. I mean, I'm not saying 100%, but it seems like from the data less affected by COVID. But again, long-term studies, we don't know. We don't really know about long-haul COVID patients. But there was one thing I wanted, and they said within the African-American community, there was the Tuskegee experiments that began in 1932, and they studied syphilis. And they basically were giving black men syphilis, from what I can read, which I heard a little bit about that when I was in school. Probably should have heard more about that, but yeah.
Right.
And then the one thing I wanted to read was the very last paragraph. The last two paragraphs. Dr. Reed Tuckerson, a co-founding member of the Black Coalition Against COVID-19 and the former Commissioner of Public Health for Washington, D.C., said that while taking care of your oral health is important, it doesn't mean you don't need to get vaccinated. There is the tyranny of the tyranny of the quote-unquote and, which we have to deal with. We need to be vaccinated and take care of our overall health, but one does not substitute the other. So that's another thing I've heard from Joe Rogan, the podcaster, from other people that have been infected. Well, if you just take care of yourself, you'll be fine. There'll be or it'll be less of a symptom.
And yet,
it's like
Joe Rogan, as soon as he got COVID, went to the hospital and got treated for it, and went so far as to use ivermectin, which is a medicine approved in human use for things had nothing to do with viruses, but is not just a horse dewormer as it's being painted. I want to put that out there again.
No, it is. Yeah, I mean it is, but yeah, I know what you're saying. It's
super bad narrative in the media. Right. Don't get me wrong. People are going to, Tractor Supply and buying
some people are
the horse dewormer version of it. Yeah. But I do think it's really funny that even he was like, oh, now I'm sick. Okay, now I need to do everything I can. So I'm going to go to the hospital and I'm going to use medications that haven't been tested for this purpose. I believe he did monoclonal antibodies, if I'm not mistaken, which, by the way, is a new medication that hasn't been tested any longer than the COVID vaccines. Yeah. I also think he did remdesivir, which is a newer medication that hasn't been used anywhere near as widely as the COVID-19 vaccines and hasn't been tested as widely because of the number of people that have had it. And so I think it's really hilarious that a lot of these people that have been very public about not getting the COVID-19 vaccine are
other experiments,
taking all of the experimental treatments as soon as they can get them.
Right.
One of the other things we haven't talked about yet that I've heard as an argument against it too is that the vaccines used fetal stem cells from aborted fetuses.
Oh yeah, this is something I think you were telling me on the phone before we started, earlier today before we...
I don't know on the mRNA vaccines from Pfizer, BioNTech, or Moderna. I don't know if they use that same stem cell in the research, but I know the J&J vaccine did, and I do think the mRNAs do as well. But these are from cloned cells from the 80s, right? This isn't that they're out there aborting babies, taking their stem cells and doing it at the clinics or promoting abortion at this point anymore. They don't need to anymore. The interesting thing to me on that is this week, a hospital in Arkansas, I believe it was, put out a directive to their employees because they've had such a huge spike in requests for religious exemptions on the vaccine that they actually, it was such a huge spike that they actually put out an agreement that says, we'll give you a tentative waiver, but it's only short term. And then if you take this waiver, understand that you can't use any other medication that is developed using these stem cells. And it's things like Tylenol, ibuprofen, other really common medications that we use on a daily basis we don't realize have been developed that way. And so it really weakens that argument. So either you're going to say like, oh man, well, like we're not going to use any of this anymore in our family and really stand your ground, or you kind of back off and go, oh man, I had no idea all these super common things that we use in daily medical treatment were developed in the same way. So that was interesting.
I do want to say, like, listen, I understand that, like, nothing is 100% and the vaccine probably does have side effects. But again, if your doctor says, like, listen, you don't have any comorbidities, you're looking good, you're good enough, like, get the vaccine, because you're only helping yourself. And many people have pointed out, especially for children, the amount of vaccinations that they have to go through to go to school. You have to get vaccinated against, I think, measles, mumps, chicken pox. Like there's a list, especially some of the, what's her, Christina Nome, is it South Dakota, North Dakota? She's the governor of, she said, this is totally unconstitutional that, that the president was requiring vaccination. And then, I don't like CNN that much, but they did point out, in your state to go to school there, you have to get 5 other vaccines, and they listed the other vaccines. So they were like, well,
and anywhere that says it's not constitutional, I always bring up, like, that's not true. You know that because when you went to school, your parents had to provide a vaccination card to get you in.
I got my card back when I graduated. I turned in everything, got my diploma. Yeah, you have your credits. Here's your diploma. We graduated from the same place. But yeah, and then they give you your card back. I'm like, oh yeah, I haven't seen this in 18 years or whatever, whenever, 10 years, 10 plus years.
Right. I do think one of the other things that they haven't talked about here, too, is, or actually kind of supports that it hasn't been fully tested, like they don't trust the vaccine yet, is this week, a bunch of information came out, and we're recording this on Sunday, September 19th, 21.
Right under the wire. It comes out on the 20th. I just want to... That's fine. We were both busy.
This week, the FDA came out and did not provide their endorsement to do booster shots on the Pfizer vaccine. I believe it was
unless you're over a certain age, I thought.
Correct. Unless you're over
like 65 and over. And even Fauci backed off and said, don't take up the boosters unless you, like if your doctor says you need to get a booster and you're eligible, So again, talk to your doctor. Your doctor says, hey there, Joe Smith, you're 70 years old. Go get the booster. He needs to go get the booster. You and I don't need to get the booster. I was thinking of getting it, but when I read all that, I was like, I'm not even going to until they go. So and I'm going to see my doctor this year for a checkup, be like, do I need to get it? If she says no, I'm like, I don't need to get the booster then.
So a big part of that, a lot of data was released when the FDA did that. And a big part of it was in their research that, yes, after 120 days from your second dose of the Pfizer vaccine, they found that the efficacy dropped from 92% prevention of severe COVID. So not prevention from getting COVID. No vaccine totally prevents it. It just eliminates severe disease.
Right.
I mean, it can prevent you from getting it, but that's not the intention, right? It's to prevent you from getting so sick you have to go to the hospital or you could die.
Right.
Then after 120 days, it can drop to as low as 77%. However, the Moderna vaccine, which gives a much higher dose when you receive it, and is given at a larger spread. So Pfizer was given at a 3-week spread, Moderna's at a 4-week spread. The Moderna vaccine went from like 91% to like 89%.
Yeah.
So there's still a whole lot they don't understand. And I think that's a really important thing for us to remember is, we've been talking about the vaccine for a long time about like, this is going to make everything different. This is going to make everything better. This is the panacea that we need. It's going to allow us to return to normal in our regular lives. And then now we're finding out like, hey, we don't really understand the long-term effects of these vaccines. Now, this isn't a negative effect. This is just how effective is the vaccine. We haven't used it long enough to really recognize how quickly it tails off.
Yeah, and I just read today that they don't really have a lot of data with breakthrough infections, which they have like broad data to say, yes, again, these people aren't going to the hospital as much. They're not using as many resources. Their symptoms are less, but we still don't know if they're going to be a long hauler, if they're going to be more susceptible to COVID later. Like, we don't know that. And I know my friends I talk to that are conservative, this is always a negative. But the way I look at it is I kind of look at it as neutral, because we're literally in the middle of this thing trying to figure it out as we go. And again, like you said, if the government wouldn't have been so popping a smoke bomb in front of the podium trying to subterfuge what was going on, I at this point I would have been like, okay, well, we don't really know, but we do know the vaccines with the amount of doses that it is safer than getting COVID, you know? So I'm just going to go with the vaccine. If I have to wear a mask in public, you and I have talked about this, it's not a big deal for me to wear a mask. If I go to a business and, like, I was working at a job site early in the morning and no one was there, a couple people came, I just forgot I had my mask, but I had it with me, and one of the, it was a school district, so they're very strict. One of the assistants or whatever was somebody, a teacher, was like, do you have your mask? I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. She's like, you're fine, just put your mask on. It's like, that doesn't offend my sensibilities. I'm not like, oh, no. You know, I'm like, okay, yeah, no big deal. Because, like, more people are here now, and I need to, you know, wear a mask.
And I do think a lot of the vaccine hesitancy ties into the mask mandates, because there was a lot of resistance to mask mandates. You can't make me wear a mask.
There was a lot of, you told me to you told me to take my mask off. I'm vaccinated now. I have to put my mask back on. So what is going on?
And again, this is all these back and forth, so I understand it. And then, like, you know, getting new data about the vaccines, about the drop off is further like, see, like, we don't know everything yet, and it's further fueling that. And I think, to your point, of talk to your doctor is probably the best advice for anyone that's vaccine hesitant. I hear a lot of people say, I do my own research, I'm doing my own research, but most of the people I know that are doing their own research are reporting back anecdotal reported stories of people that are outlier cases of severe symptoms or breakthrough cases. In fact, I've had conversations with people about breakthrough cases now going on in Israel, because Israel was one of the earliest countries vaccinated, and their excuse for not getting vaccinated is because, well, you can still get it.
Yeah, I mean, I got the flu vaccine almost every year, and I still got the flu every once in a while, but it wasn't, those years weren't as bad. But if they were bad, I'd get one, like, every 3 years I get, like, or 4 years, I get, like, a really, you know, it was a long time where I'd get, like, a really bad case of the flu.
Because every once in a while they predict which variant of the flu virus will be the primary one, and sometimes they get it wrong.
Yeah, and you also get the one where, you know, they put a couple, I think they put a couple strands of that flu in the flu shot, and I just happened to get the third out of 2 strands, you know, the one strand that eluded the vaccine, that's like, aha, you know, that's the one that I would get and be really sick, you know, and then that's how vaccines work. They just rotate through them every day, you know, so.
But one of my biggest questions, too, though, is because, like, you watch the narrative on the hesitant side of things, and so frequently, like, anytime there's new information, there's a reason to discredit that information.
Right.
And so, like, for me, I think one of the most important questions to ask is, like, at this point, is there any source that you would trust to give you honest and accurate information about this? Because I do think there's people that don't trust their doctors, which, I mean, if that's the case, why are you going to that doctor? Like, you should find a doctor that you do trust.
Yeah.
But if you trust your doctor, then, like, ask your doctor. Because unlike you going online and reading anecdotal stories about people that have had severe reactions or people that have still died even after getting the vaccine.
And again, that's not to discredit people's anecdotal, like,
they're real things, but they're outliers.
Yeah. And you're basically basing, and again, like I said at the beginning, it's hard to take, like, I do know people that have gotten COVID that have been hospitalized, but they got the vaccine as soon as they could right after that.
Yeah.
You know? But their thing is they don't want to hear anybody that's hesitant, because they're like, listen, this is real. Mm-hmm. And I've heard from other people saying, well, I don't understand. This doesn't affect me. It doesn't matter. There's no reason to get it. And, like, I was talking to them saying, well, in certain parts of the country, you know, hospitalizations are up. There's limited resources. And they would say, well, that's way in another part of the country. That doesn't affect me.
Okay.
You know, so it's the opposite end of, like, I need to see it for it to be real, you know.
It's kind of interesting, actually, as I was scrolling down reading these articles, one of the side articles was... Oh,
like, if you like this, you will like this?
Maybe. I mean, it's in the column on the right-hand side. is Chris Rock says he has COVID. Quote, "Trust me, you don't want this." End quote.
Yeah, I think he was vaccinated as well. So he's probably had a breakthrough infection. And that's another thing. Everybody says, well, see, there's breakthrough infections. And it's like, I believe it's because there's so many people that are unvaccinated to vaccinated people that, I mean, I'd like to see that data too, to see if there's correlation between, I mean, common sense says that would make the most amount of sense. If people are walking around unvaccinated and they're around vaccinated people, you have a better shot of getting infected even if you're vaccinated.
In May, he received the J&J vaccine.
No.
So the J&J was less effective in testing. But he is using the opportunity to urge people to get vaccinated. Because honestly, like, for those that are getting severely sick, like, I've known a handful of people who've had COVID, and a couple of them were really, really sick.
Hospitalized or?
Borderline.
Like they were going to make the call or go in or, yeah.
Yep. You and I know two people, friends of ours, that got sick and ended up having to go to the hospital. Didn't end up in the hospital, but still had to go to the hospital because it was so severe.
Like a 24-hour stint is what I heard.
I know someone where they're a couple. They both got it, and one of the couple ended up in the hospital for 7 or 8 days.
Wow.
And then had to take oxygen home. I know another gentleman that was in his mid-60s that ended up getting it and had to go into the hospital a couple times but never stayed, but was bedridden for 3 weeks because he couldn't get enough oxygen in his system and he was just constantly tired.
Right.
And then I've known at least 4 or 5 people that have had it and they're like, yeah, it wasn't even a bad cold. Like, I didn't go anywhere because it's COVID, but I wasn't sick for even a week. Lost my sense of smell, lost my sense of taste. Within a week, it was back to normal. Everything was fine. And I think that really makes it difficult because if everyone you've known has been in that mild case
You're like,
scenario,
yeah, it's no big deal.
versus the serious case scenario, like there's like, whatever, I'll just take my chances. And look at the data, right? Like the numbers of COVID on the fatality rate are really low. So for a lot of people, it's like, hey, I'm young, I'm healthy, like, the odds of me dying are like 0.001%. Like, I'm not gonna deal with it.
Well, I was the other way where, yeah, you can hear the stories where you say, oh, everybody that I've heard has a mild case, so I'm fine. But I've heard, like we were just talking about, I've heard tons of stories about, yeah, I had a mild case, I was hospitalized. To me, it's like, what can I do to not be part of any of that?
At the very beginning, a friend of mine from church, his grandpa died within the first month or two of COVID getting to the States. Like, I've known people personally on both ends of that, like mild or serious. And I've known people that have lost family members because of it. I simply just don't want it. I don't want to spread it. I don't want to get that sick. I've been less sick than a severe case of COVID before. I was in 2012, so I don't remember if that was bird flu or swine flu when it was going around.
Yeah.
But I had that, and I was so miserably sick. If there had been any way for me to avoid that, I would have done it. And so I have no desire to get COVID, have any of the other ramifications that come along with it.
Yeah,
but,
I don't want to treat my body like an experiment. Yeah, and I guess some people would say that with the vaccine, but talking to medical professionals and talking to the nurses and everything when I was getting my shot, they were like, no, there's more of a percentage of people that have been okay getting the shot. Because basically getting the shot, I think there's enough data in to say, okay, this is what you should expect. But like we just talked about with COVID, you don't know what to expect. You could be a mild case or all the way to the extreme. So
yeah.
What do you, like, if you're using the odds by getting the vaccine.
And the side effects from the vaccine are very mild, right? Now, there are severe reactions from people, but that's a very small percentage.
Right.
And the overwhelming majority have the same level of discomfort for 24 to 48 hours. And I'm not going to lie, I felt like shit.
Yeah, I felt bad for like, I think a day, like my arm was sore and I felt a little tired, but that went away. And then the next shot, I don't know which one was worse actually, but one of them I just felt tired for like a day.
Day of wasn't so bad. My arm was sore, it was kind of eh. Day after, like, I was in I was miserable. Both Lisa and I were both miserable on both shots.
Yeah.
The second shot wasn't as bad for me. The first shot on the third, so day 1 is the day of the shot. Day 2, day after was miserable. Day 3 was not miserable, but like I couldn't. My arm was so sore I couldn't reach behind my back.
A lot of back scratching then. Yeah, from the wife. Yeah. Well, I had a coworker that had something similar where they got the second shot. He was like, yeah, I got it, and he wasn't hesitant or anything. But we were working, and he just came. He's like, man, I don't feel good. Like, I got it yesterday. I'm like, well, go home, man. Like, just sleep it off. And then I talked to him, like, the day afterwards. He's like, I'm good now. I need to sleep. I was like, I get that. I've had that happen, like, twice with the flu shot where they're like, hey, it's a bad year. There's going to be they'll tell you when you get the shot, like, yeah, you're going to probably feel kind of, you're going to have a day where you don't feel good. I mean, to close out, I would just say that, like, listen to your doctor. Hopefully you have a doctor you can trust. Like you said, if you don't, why are you going to that doctor? But if your doctor says to get it, get the vaccine. And, I just like to say it again. It's not about your personal freedom. It's about the community of people that you're around. It's about your family, your friends. You don't want to be the one that is that anecdote to somebody of like, yeah, I know somebody who didn't get it and they gave it to people around them, like, again, the vaccine does have side effects, but they're very, in the scheme of things, mild. And that's all I would say is, please don't, I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to yell. I'm tired of all that. I can't convince people to get the vaccine. Mm-hmm. What you have to do is just say, listen, if your doctor says you should get it, just go get it. Because I don't want to. I mean, there's no sense in like you said. If you try to argue with someone, you're not going to sway them anyway. Yeah. So that's my thing. Is like if your doctor says get the shot, just get the shot, and know it's about the community and the people you care about. It doesn't have to do with you. And that's the biggest thing when this all started. When there wasn't a vaccine and there was more deaths, is I heard all the time online from all those anecdotes where people at the end say this isn't about you, and I just like to echo that and say it's not about you. It's about your loved ones and the people you're with, you see every day and all that kind of stuff. So, and
the loved ones of the people around you, right? Because it may not be them that you make sick. It might be them taking it home to their loved ones.
Right.
And that was the big argument with the masks, right? Like, don't make me wear a mask. Well, I don't want you around me, right? So kind of in summation for me, I mirror what you say, right? Like, if you've got a doctor you trust, go talk to your doctor. I will add on top of that, don't tell me you're going to do your own research, and don't tell me to go do my own research without actually doing research. I'm not looking for anecdotes. I'm not looking for doctors of psychology that are giving medical advice.
Chiropractors, that's another thing.
Go look up the data. You can find it. These medical reports are out there, and then teach yourself the lingo. Because if you want to research the efficacy of that and not trust the scientists who are trained in it, then go out and read the complex medical reports, and when you get confused, ask questions about what it means. Or find someone that you trust that is a medical professional, maybe the same person that you go to that treats all of your other ailments and illnesses, and ask them, what have you seen? What have you heard? What's the real information on this? Because your doctor doesn't have a financial vested interest in you getting vaccinated enough for them to lie to you.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's true. Like,
they're not in on the giant conspiracy. Yeah. And I'm not saying it is a giant conspiracy, but like...
I mean, that's a whole other episode on why these things...
So that advice is great. I will also say, though, that I do understand the personal freedom and personal liberty argument that's being made, because it is a dangerous precedent to sit out and dictate to businesses, your employees have to be vaccinated. We've never seen that anywhere before, except in healthcare professions. I think it's a very dangerous precedent to mandate this type of vaccine.
Yeah, like I said, I'm with you. I'm not excited that Biden had to do that, but my thing is like, well, here we are. Like there's, with the spread of these variants, like what else is he supposed to do now? I would like to say the conservatives out there that are getting mad at every business, it's like, for years we've been going to businesses with signs saying, we have the right to refuse service to anybody, and we didn't think about it. And now if you go to a restaurant and they make you show a card and you go on about your HIPAA violations, which it may be, I don't know. That's something I haven't read about. But you have to realize that it's a private business and they have the right to...
It's not a HIPAA violation.
Well, they have a right to conduct their business the way they want. And if you don't like it, then go to another restaurant, And
exactly.
if that's how you support businesses, with your dollars.
But that's a free and private business making its own decision. Wow, I can talk. That's a free and private business making its own private decision. And I'm okay with that. Just like conservatives for years have been saying the same thing about, businesses not wanting to provide services to gay people or transgender people or anything else along those lines. It's different, right? Like I've heard it a million times before. It's different because that's prejudice, because it's something a person can't change about themselves, whereas a vaccine is something someone can change about themselves. But at the end of the day, the point is, if you're going to make the argument for a free and private business to be allowed to do what a free and private business wants to do, you can't change your mind when they do something you don't like.
Yeah.
Which is what they're doing there. Also, it's not a HIPAA violation. It's a HIPAA violation when a business shares your private medical information, not when you share it with them.
Yeah, that's the way I looked at it. Is like
You can ask me all day long. I don't have to give it to you. If I choose to give it to you, I'm giving you that information of my own free will and volition.
Yeah.
It is a little bit sticky when it comes to the government mandating that if you want to be open as a business, you have to verify. And I don't know where that comes from.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if they've done that yet. Isn't it just federal employees right now that like...
No, there's discussion of, and I don't even know, I think City of Seattle may even regulate it. If you want to be open, you have to verify vaccination status of
your employees.
Patrons.
Oh, patrons.
Yeah. So
that's
a little bit...
So that'll come up in a court case. Somebody will sue somebody over that, I know.
If they haven't already.
Right, and I'm not, again, when Biden made that, I was like, well, here we are.
I mean, there's a lot of Democrats that are against it, but I read an article on it. I think they made a really good case that, Biden was kind of backed against the wall. Like, he had to do something. Yeah. And so this was a good way to make it look like he's acting. Plus, he does not look good in the media right now with everything going on in Afghanistan, so at least he can seem strong on something.
What an interesting segue, because I think that finishes that episode, but next month is my choice. And I've been reading the Afghan papers by Craig Whitlock. He works for the Washington Post. They sued the government, the Washington Post did, for 2 years to get interviews. That's what I want to talk about is Afghanistan, because we have seen in the news it is terrible. It was built on a house of cards. I'm about 60% because the way Amazon on my Kindle does pages. I'm sure I could change that somewhere, but anyway. I want to talk about Afghanistan. I'm not going to make you read a whole book. What I'll do is I can send you portions of the book, or I can send you quotes, and I'll probably do that, and we will talk about it, because they do go over until like the end of or the midpoint in Obama's administration. But of course, the Afghanistan war happened in 2001 after September 11th and went on through 4 administrations. So I just like to point that out. And so what I want to do is look at it and see just how troubling it was getting through the book. I haven't really taken any notes. I will say anecdotally reading it that they did like an oral history from the Virginia Military Academy, I think, and the lessons learned interview was an internal, whatever they also talk about, SIGMAR, which I can't remember what it stands for, but it's basically an internal investigation committee interviewing people in the various parts of the military, everywhere from Petraeus to some line corporal somewhere. Anyway, everybody, basically, contractors, diplomats, all talking about how Afghanistan failed and what led up to its incredible, what we saw in the news with people hanging off planes trying to get out of the country, the fact that Glenn Beck and other Christian organizations had to pay for planes to be over there to evacuate Christians, and just what a terrible disaster it was. And again, I'm not letting Biden off the hook. I know he's the new administration. He was there during the Obama administration and also made mistakes, during his presidency. But I would like to point out there was 3 other administrations that were involved in this. So it is, 20 years of And that's what I want to talk about next month. Like I said, I'll be done with the book here shortly because I'm working nights, so I'm reading more. And I'll be able to send you some quotes. So that's what we're going to talk about next month. So yay, Afghanistan, yay.
Well, it'll still be an ongoing thing at that point, right? Because we're
will be
still
too.
working to get people out. I saw an article last week about U.S. Special Forces helped smuggle some people out through some mountain passes. Like, yeah, it's going to be a disaster. It's going to stick around for a long time.
I mean, and we'll still be, and the Washington Post is still waiting for, I guess, part of the court case to get more documents. They wanted more, and the government had to redact stuff, obviously, and they only released so many thousands of pages, but there's more. So they'll probably write like a part 2 when they're able to sift through the rest of the documents and, do that. So what do you want to plug before we leave, Avin?
Obviously, I'll rep for your other podcast since I got to participate in it finally.
Yay.
It's like the second time in like 4 years or whatever I've been on that one.
Good, yeah.
So definitely check out Gaming with Grief. This is grief politics. I think there's a lot of grief in the politics around the COVID vaccination.
People are dying. This is literally could be a life or death decision,
right?
Based on how you want to get, if you want to get vaccinated or don't. So
and also, go check it out. I'm a real estate agent. Check me out at Your Agent Guide on Facebook.
Yeah, don't get grief from not getting a house that you want. It's the lightest amount of grief you can get, but it is. As you and I have bought in homes, it is something that is frustrating if you don't know what you're doing. Going into it for the second time when we get our next house, it's one of those things where definitely there's a lot of stuff that I'll ask that I had no idea to ask when I got my first home. So anybody that can help you do that, do that. Yep. Get somebody to help you do that.
Yep. And that is kind of my premise. If I'm not in your area where I would be working with you directly, like my objective is to teach and educate how to find good, qualified, professional real estate agents or brokers, depending on where you live in the country and how it's legally defined, to help you get through that process. And again, that's youragentguide.com or Your Agent Guide on Facebook.
Yeah, and I just want to remind everybody that, again, this podcast will hit The Grief of Politics. That's www.thegriefofpolitics.com at Monday, the 20th of every month at 7 a.m. It will hit tomorrow at 7 a.m. You can leave a comment. Let us know how well we did or how bad we did. Thanks to everybody that listens to the show on, I believe, iTunes, because you're not on the Google Play Store. Let us know there. You can write us at gwgpodfellows@gmail.com. Tell Avin or I if you have a question for us, and let us know it's from The Grief of Politics, because I'm paying for that for my other podcast, and I don't want to pay for another Gmail suite. So,
and seriously, if you guys have comments, we'd love to hear it.
Yeah, that'd be great. Any kind of letters would be good, because if that doesn't happen, I think on my other podcast, I'm just going to start reading the promotional material I get from Google all the time about like the coupons that I get in the email. So I think that's it for this month. So yeah, next month we're going to talk about Afghanistan. It's my turn to pick, and Avin and I will have a massive discussion about that, because we've already, again, talked about it on the phone, and we had long conversations about that. So anything else, Avin, to add before we take off?
No, thank you everyone for listening. Really appreciate it. And look forward to reading any comments you guys might have between now and the next podcast.
Sweet. All right, bye guys.